Diemension Games is proud to present Storytime with Byron Levitt. Enjoy.
Oh, well, hello there. I wasn't expecting to see you there. How are you doing today? My name's Byron Levitt. What's your name? Well, it's a pleasure to meet you. It's a pleasure to meet you. I was just reading a little bit from the book, The Art of Deep Madness. It's fascinating stuff. Really enjoying it, and it's fully illustrated. My favorite. Would you like to dive in with me? Oh, sure. Why not? Let's just read a little nugget together here, and we'll see. We'll see what this book has in store for us. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Here's one that I'm quite fond of. It's called Consciousness Fusion Experiment. Let's dive in and see what it has to tell us. The chamber rumbled open and the stream of scientists, alchemists, and experts filed into the room. A thick layer of ash drifted across the floor, disturbed by the footfalls of the newcomers and the breeze from the open doorway. Ha! Off to a good start, don't you think? Experiment number 256, Dr. Fillmore said, writing on a notepad. Status, failure. Subjects immolated. He turned to his aide. Get the cleanup crew in here. I want these remains collected. Then bring in the next test subject. Perhaps we can manage 3 experiments in one day today. The mask was yanked from Gerald Hughes's face, and he stumbled into a large, sterile room as a steel door swung shut behind him. Gerald rubbed his aching wrists while furiously blinking his eyes into focus. There was a wall of mirrors to his left. He suspected this was one-way observation glass. Electric lights buzzed overhead, illuminating the strange scientific apparatuses and crystals lining the walls. And then, of course, there was the immense fossilized relic in the center of the room. Dashing good start, dashing good start. Gerald glanced at the one-way glass, then slowly advanced toward the artifact. This was why he was here, of course. The question was, why? What was he supposed to glean from this bizarre object? The closer he drew, the more something stirred inside Gerald. His heart began fluttering in his chest, and his breathing hastened. He was drawn to this thing. He couldn't explain how, but it had a quality that was undoubtedly familiar. Of course, that was preposterous. To his knowledge, he had never seen a chunk of fossilized monster before. Reaching out a hand, Gerald touched it. The universe unfolded before him like a flower. At once, Gerald was inside himself, and his self was expanding to enfold the cosmos. He felt another presence weave around him, through him, one ancient, alien, and powerful. Images flashed in Gerald's mind, one after the other. He saw strange places and even stranger beings waging war with one another. Behind them, he also discerned something dark, consuming, and utterly alive. Barriers had been erected between him and that Stygian entity. Reaching out, Gerald tried to push past those barriers. Gerald felt a warning. The ancient presence was trying to tell him something, trying to make him see. You're a liar, Gerald, his wife Lizzie said. You said you'd take care of us. Where'd you go? I trusted you, said his faithful customer Ben. I put everything I had into that opportunity just like you told me. I lost everything. You always were a filthy fraud, Gerald, his mother Hilda said. A splitting pain ripped through Gerald's stomach. Crying out, he jerked up his shirt and was shocked to peer out at the world from his abdomen. Ah, there's that third eye you're always talking about, Ben said. Perhaps you can see for us all, Gerald, Lizzie said. Then the smooth skin pooled over their eyeballs. Their mouths opened wider, their teeth melding into their lips and elongating to skin-colored spines. They were growing taller too, and thinner. Letting his shirt fall once more over his bulbous third eye, Gerald turned and ran. Old dilapidated boards crunched underfoot as light sifted through broken windows overhead. Behind him came the thunder of a rampaging mob, and then the skittering of a creature. The light vanished. Looking up, Gerald saw an ocean of void plunging toward him that seethed with innumerable eyes, mouths, and minds. It crashed on the ground and swirled around him as his acquaintances descended. Their bodies fused into a macabre amalgamation of distinct upper bodies and nightmarish human insect. Gerald felt his consciousness unraveling. He squealed like a stuck pig as his mind ruptured, his brittle soul cracking and crumbling. He was losing elasticity, like taffy stretched too thin. He retreated inward and pulled himself back, extricating his mind. Gerald collapsed to the room's metal floor, steam rising off his maimed, distorted body. His kneecap was sticking out his back, his left arm emerging from his abdomen, directly below his third eye. "Help me," Gerald gurgled, reaching his one functioning arm up imploringly toward the one-way glass. His head thumped on the ground as his neck lost its form. Then he felt something, or perhaps several somethings, burst inside him. Dr. Fillmore cursed and grabbed his notepad as he flung open the door. "Hurry!" he roared. "The subject's still alive!" Fillmore verbally berated the guards as they fumbled the door open. Then he charged into the room, skidding to his knees next to the subject. Lowering his face to within inches of the man's mangled body, he asked, "What did you see? How do we enlighten mankind?" "The sea is alive," the subject burbled, "and full of eyes." Then his heart popped in his chest. Fillmore wiped blood off his face and sighed as he climbed to his feet. "Experiment number 257, he said, scribbling on his notepad. "Status failure. Subject mutated beyond compatibility with life." "How goes the work, Dr. Fillmore?" Dr. Fillmore bowed to Lord Hass. "Sir, we had a most intriguing experiment. The patient in question emerged from the dimensional field alive, albeit heavily mutated. He lived long enough to speak, though his words were not as meaningful as one might hope." "Interesting," Lord Hass said. "What made him different?" "The subject seemed to exhibit superior mental capacity, and we have obtained reports that he previously boasted of possessing psychic abilities," Fillmore said. "We also attempted the first phase of a new buffering technique which may have played a part." Hass mused. "Perhaps we need to refine our search for candidates. In fact, perhaps we should see if there is some way we could draw them to us, rather than us looking for them." "How would we go about doing that, sir?" Fillmore asked. Hass offered him a cold smile. "You're an intelligent man, Dr. Fillmore," he said. "I'm sure you'll figure something out." Well, how about that? That wasn't what I was expecting at all. Quite gave me the shivers, actually. What do you say we do one more? Maybe a little more subdued, eh? Let's see here. Let's see. Something to cleanse the palate. Here we go. This looks like a good one. Yes, this looks very good. Very reassuring image beside it as well, yes. The Fall of Kadath. The beam of Judy's flashlight landed on Dr. Cohen's face as he cowered in the corner, rocking slowly back and forth. The entire mining facility shook, knocking Judy into a wall. "Dr. Cohen?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What's going on? Where is everybody?" "It's the sphere," Cohen said. "The sphere! The sphere!" Cohen began to sob. "That's the problem!" And then he shrieked. Judy scowled and turned around. Her mind couldn't accept what stood before her. It had no certain form. Apart from whipping tentacles and vicious teeth, it looked like it had just stepped out of her worst nightmare. "It's our fears, Judy! It made them real!" Their screams were abruptly silenced, and the only sounds that remained were a terrible wet chewing and the soft grinding of a flashlight rolling on the metal floor. A grim silence hung pendulously over the cafeteria, the only sounds arising from the clang and scrape of silverware and the workers chewing. Even in that quiet, though, the things that people weren't saying, the stories of Vic's death, the rumors of horrors stalking the halls, the disappearances of entire work crews, screamed. Kevin Wilkes sat alone at a table, shoveling food into his mouth as if he were starving. Nora Jasper, sitting at the table behind him, leaned toward him. "Slow down, Kevin," she whispered. "You'll make yourself sick. It's going to be okay." Kevin kept eating. "Hey, have you lost weight?" Nora asked. Then the lights went out. It was a few seconds before they flickered back on briefly, but when they did, Nora saw Kevin was now standing. They flickered off and on again, and Nora noticed Kevin had turned toward her. 3 tongues slithered out of his mouth, his jawbone snapping in multiple places to allow his maw to open wider. Nora shrieked. As she did, she heard others following suit across the cafeteria. The lights went out again, and the feeding frenzy began. "Any word from Miss Blake?" Terrence Wade asked, studying his displays. "No, sir," Lynn Fisher said. "Her node's unanswered." "We have another confirmed breakout in Dome 3, Jasper Hicks said, "and another apparition has been reported in the main power array. I'm also receiving word that whole rooms are changing. It's as if they've been infected with some sort of fungus." Wade sighed, closing his eyes momentarily. "Initiate emergency containment lockdown. I want all personnel to proceed to establish safe zones or confine themselves to quarters. Only essential crew members will maintain their positions. Miss Fisher, contact the surface. Tell them to withhold all further submersible runs until Kadath is back under full control. Mr. Hicks, contact Dr. West and Dr. Cohen. If there is any hope, I want it now." Sir? "I am registering a number of employees advancing toward the Sphere's Bay," Lynn said. "How many?" Wade asked. "Upwards of 30, she said. Ronald Myers is among them." Wade cursed. "I told him to stand down, get his node pulled up, and get security to stop them before they do something we can't undo." Ronald Myers led his ragtag band up to the hatch that hid the sphere. Private Parks stared at him, a haunted look in his eyes as he blocked the way. "Let us through, Parks," Ronald said. "You know this has to happen." Sighing, Parks nodded. "Yeah, it does." Ronald and the others stepped to the hatch and Parks cycled it open. "Move, people!" Ronald bellowed. "Do whatever it takes! Get that thing out of Kadath!" The group rushed into the room with Ronald at the lead. Innumerable mind-rending horrors rose to meet them, and then the world began to spin. Ronald stumbled as he felt terror drowning his senses. He stared in shock as his friends were shredded by teeth and claws and tendrils, gasping in incomprehension as Gerald White caved in Private Parks' skull with a fire extinguisher, and Clive stabbed Felicia in the eye with a screwdriver. Hal was ripping Desmond's throat out with his teeth. Ronald needed to end this. He needed to stop the sphere. Letting out a roar, he charged straight ahead, batting aside anything that came near. He only needed to get the thing out. Even if he died, he could still save everyone else. Ronald drew closer to the sphere, eyeing the panel that would release it back into the ocean. And then he ran right out the hatch he had entered through. Ronald screeched to a bewildered halt in the corridor and turned around. Collapsing to his knees, he watched as the last of his friends were butchered. The sphere still sat there, mocking him, its surface spinning as the worlds, minds, and horrors within it churned in a terrifying kaleidoscope of maddening chaos. Ronald began to weep, and then he began to laugh. He had utterly failed. God help them all. Charles Ryan had been out scouting the ocean for a long time, and the calm silence as he approached Kadath was beginning to make him nervous. Tapping his coat into the emergency airlock override, he stepped inside and waited for it to cycle. Once it had, Charles exited the airlock and stepped directly into a charnel house. He gasped. Bodies, blood, and entrails were drizzled along the corridor like caramel on ice cream. "Hello?" Charles called. "Is anyone still alive here?" There was no answer. With growing dread, Charles advanced. Not long after, Charles discovered Dr. Cohen's remains strewn across the floor. Charles knelt beside the doctor's corpse. This wasn't exactly what he'd had in mind when he said they'd meet again. Ironically, what was left of Cohen now was about as much as the doctor had preserved of Charles's body when he fused Charles to his moving metal coffin. Something bumped in the next room. Charles snapped his gaze upward. Perhaps he wasn't as alone as he had originally presumed. Well, how about that? Wasn't that just a rousing tale of adventure and... who am I kidding? That was the most disturbing thing I've read in weeks. What? Forget this. I'm done. Forget this. Who wrote this crap?